The sound of his smartphone camera clicking repeatedly was what first alerted James Rodriguez to Karen Wilkinson's presence at his fence line. He'd been floating peacefully in his new above-ground pool, eyes closed against the summer sun, when the unmistakable sound of someone documenting his violation reached his ears. "Excuse me." Karen's voice pierced through the ambient sounds of the peaceful suburban afternoon. "This pool installation violates at least 7 different HOA bylaws." James sighed, opening his eyes to see the immaculately coiffed blonde head of Oak Ridge Estate's most notorious resident poking over his fence. Karen's French manicured fingers gripped his fence as she strained to get a better angle for her photos, her designer sunglasses perched atop her head. "Good afternoon to you too, Karen," James replied, not moving from his float. "Don't you good afternoon me," Karen snapped. Section 8, paragraph 4 clearly states all exterior modifications must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee. I checked the records this morning and there's no approval for this eyesore. James had, in fact, obtained all proper approvals, but he knew better than to argue with Hurricane Karen when she was mid-storm. As HOA board president for the past 3 years, Karen Wilkinson had turned their once-friendly neighborhood into a battleground of petty infractions and steep fines. From her vantage point, Karen couldn't see the twins, her own 12-year-old sons, Tyler and Connor, crouched behind James' garden shed, preparing to launch water balloons at the yards of other neighbors. They'd been terrorizing the neighborhood all summer while Karen was too busy policing fence heights and unauthorized bird feeders to notice. "I'll be submitting a formal complaint at tomorrow's board meeting," Karen continued, tapping furiously on her phone. "This pool threatens our property values and the aesthetic integrity of our community." What Karen didn't realize was that her crusade against James' perfectly legitimate pool installation would set in motion a series of events that would unravel her carefully controlled world. The very meeting she was planning would become the catalyst for her downfall. Behind her, Tyler whispered to Connor, "Mom's gonna be busy tomorrow night. Perfect time for Operation Midnight Swim." The boys giggled, eyeing James' crystal-clear pool with mischievous intent. As Karen marched away, already drafting her scathing email to the board members, James smiled to himself. He'd installed security cameras just last week, another HOA-approved modification that had a perfect view of the twins' antics. The footage of their neighborhood pranks was safely stored on his cloud drive, a potential insurance policy he never thought he'd need. Little did Karen know that her crusade against the wrong neighbor would expose far more than just swimming pool regulations. By this time tomorrow, her carefully cultivated image as Oak Ridge Estate's perfect resident and mother would begin crumbling faster than the cheap decorative columns she forced the Hendersons to remove last spring. As the sun began its descent behind the perfectly uniform rooflines of Oak Ridge Estates, the stage was set for a neighborhood showdown that would change everything, especially for Karen Wilkinson. The Oak Ridge Estates community center buzzed with unusual energy. Typically, HOA meetings attracted only the board members and perhaps 1 or 2 homeowners with specific complaints, but tonight, every folding chair was filled. Word had spread about Karen's latest crusade against James Rodriguez's new pool, and neighbors were curious to see the showdown. Karen arrived 15 minutes early as always, her leather portfolio embossed with the HOA logo clutched to her chest. She wore her power outfit, cream-colored pantsuit, pearls, and sensible yet expensive pumps, her blonde bob swinging with each determined step. She faltered momentarily when she saw the crowd but quickly recovered, chin lifting with renewed purpose. "Quite the turnout," remarked Gerald, the elderly treasurer who usually napped through meetings. "People are finally taking community standards seriously," Karen replied, misreading the room entirely as she arranged her documentation in perfect stacks. At precisely 7:00 p.m., Karen called the meeting to order, briskly moving through the agenda until reaching new business. Her eyes gleamed as she pulled out her folder labeled Pool Violation, 423 Oak Ridge Lane. "I'd like to address a serious breach of our community standards," Karen began, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation she prepared. "James Rodriguez at 423 Oak Ridge has installed an unauthorized swimming pool that violates multiple bylaws." She displayed the photos she'd taken, pointing out perceived infractions with a laser pointer. "As you can see, this eyesore is visible from the street, exceeds the height limitation for backyard structures, and the owner failed to submit proper documentation." From the back of the room, James raised his hand. "Point of order, Madam President." Karen's smile tightened. "Yes, Mr. Rodriguez." James approached the front carrying a thin folder. "I'd like to submit into the record my approved application for the pool installation signed by board member Linda Davis 3 months ago, along with the contractor's compliance certification with all HOA specifications." The room fell silent as Karen flipped through the paperwork, her complexion shifting from porcelain to pink to crimson. This appears to be an order," she finally admitted, voice strained. "However, I don't recall this coming before the full board." Linda Davis, a retired schoolteacher who joined the board to keep Karen honest, spoke up. It didn't require full board review under the bylaw amendments we passed last year, Karen. You yourself argue that routine approvals should be streamlined to reduce the board's workload. A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience. Karen's knuckles whitened around her gavel. Very well, she conceded with visible effort. We'll move on to the next. Actually, James interrupted, since I'm here, I'd like to raise another matter of community concern. Karen's eyes narrowed. That's not on the agenda. Under Article 5, Section 2, any member in good standing may raise issues of community concern during new business, James countered smoothly. And I believe this qualifies. He connected his laptop to the projector while Karen seethed, helpless to stop him without violating her precious bylaws. I've been documenting some concerning activity in our neighborhood parks and common areas, James explained, pulling up the first video. I'm sure we can all agree that vandalism and property destruction don't align with our community values. The screen filled with crystal-clear footage of two boys, unmistakably Karen's twins, spray painting obscenities on the community playground equipment. A collective gasp rippled through the room as the video played. Tyler and Connor Wilkinson's faces were clearly visible as they defaced the newly installed playground equipment that Karen herself had championed as part of her family-friendly Oak Ridge initiative. Turn that off immediately. Karen's voice cracked as she slammed her gavel repeatedly. This is inappropriate and irrelevant to Egoid business. James calmly continued, I have additional documentation of 17 separate incidents over the past month alone, including the destruction of Mrs. Abernathy's prized rose bushes and the clogging of the community pool filters with sand, which cost us $3,200 to repair. Karen's face drained of color. She hadn't connected the recent vandalism wave to her own children. She'd been too busy organizing her neighborhood patrol to catch the delinquents from the apartment complex down the street, whom she publicly blamed. Where are my boys now? Karen stammered, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. Perhaps at home where they should be supervised, suggested Linda Davis, arching an eyebrow. Karen fumbled for her phone with trembling hands. No missed calls, no texts. The twins were supposedly at their weekly science enrichment program, a program she'd insisted they attend despite their protests, determined they would have the perfect college applications one day. As Karen frantically dialed her home number, Gerald cleared his throat. I move that we table the current agenda and address the vandalism issue immediately, as it has resulted in significant expenditure of AHOA funds. I second, Linda said quickly. Karen barely heard them, listening to her home phone ring endlessly. No answer. All in favor? Gerald asked the room. A chorus of hands went up, including those of every board member except Karen, who was now gathering her belongings in disarray. Motion passes, Gerald announced, taking over the meeting smoothly. Now, James, you have evidence of other incidents. But James was watching Karen with unexpected compassion. I think we should take a brief recess, he suggested. Mrs. Wilkinson clearly needs to check on her family. Karen didn't acknowledge his courtesy, already halfway to the door, her pearl necklace askew and her portfolio forgotten on the table. The whispers followed her out of the room, burning her ears. The same neighbors she'd cited for unapproved mailbox colors and improperly stored trash cans now witnessing her humiliation. She fumbled with her car keys, dropping them twice before managing to unlock her white Lexus SUV, parked, as always, in the spot closest to the entrance despite it being reserved for the elderly and disabled. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. The boys had never missed her calls before. What if they were hurt? What if they'd been caught by police? What if? As she pulled out of the parking lot with a screech of tires, her phone finally chimed with a text. Her heart lurched as she read the message from Tyler. At James' house, having a midnight swim. Don't worry, we got in just fine. Karen's blood turned to ice, the security system. She'd been so busy with HOA matters that she postponed updating the security code for 3 months straight. As she sped toward James' house, Karen didn't notice the police car parked at the corner of Oak Ridge Lane. She didn't see Officer Martinez, who'd been investigating the vandalism reports for weeks, watching her car with great interest. Karen's perfectly ordered world was unraveling thread by thread, and she was about to discover just how tangled things could get. When Karen screeched to a halt in front of James' house, the scene that greeted her was worse than she'd imagined. Red and blue lights pulsed silently from a police cruiser parked in the driveway. The front door stood open, warm light spilling onto the perfectly manicured lawn, the same lawn she'd cited last fall for being a quarter-inch too tall. She stumbled from her car, not bothering to close the door behind her. As she approached the house, she could hear Connor's unmistakable wail, the same sound he made when she refused to let him attend Justin's birthday party because the family had put up unauthorized wind chimes. I'm here. I'm their mother, Karen called out, rushing through the front door without knocking. The tableau in James' living room froze her in place. Tyler and Connor sat dripping on the expensive leather couch she once complained was visible from the street and inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetics. Both boys were wrapped in plush towels, their expressions a mixture of defiance and fear. Officer Martinez stood nearby, notebook in hand, while James leaned against the fireplace, arms crossed. "Mrs. Wilkinson," Officer Martinez greeted her, his tone neutral but his eyes assessing. "We were just discussing the security footage Mr. Rodriguez has compiled over the past several weeks. My boys wouldn't," Karen began automatically, her denial reflex kicking in. "Mom, stopped," Tyler interrupted, his voice cracking. At 12, he stood on the precipice of adolescence, no longer the little boy who'd blindly accepted her version of reality. "We did it. All of it. And we're caught. You can't just write a check or threaten to sue someone to make this go away." Karen staggered slightly, reaching for the back of a chair to steady herself. "I don't understand. Why would you do these things? Do you have any idea how this reflects on our family? On me?" Connor looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "That's all you care about, isn't it? How everything looks, not how it feels." "What are you talking about?" Karen asked, genuinely confused. Her mind raced, calculating how to minimize the damage, or she could call what leverage she might have over James or Officer Martinez. "Mrs. Wilkinson," James said quietly, "your sons broke into my home tonight using your house key, which apparently also opens my door due to a contractor error. They've been planning to use my pool without permission. Unfortunately, my security system alerted me, and I called the police." "We just wanted to swim," Connor muttered. "You never let us do anything fun." Officer Martinez cleared his throat. Breaking and entering is a serious offense even for juveniles, and when combined with the vandalism charges. "Vandalism charges?" Karen repeated weakly. "The boys have admitted to numerous incidents around the neighborhood," the officer continued. "Mr. Rodriguez has provided video evidence of 16 separate occasions." Karen's mind spun, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. She'd spent years crafting the perfect image, president of the HOA, chair of 3 PTA committees, organizer of the annual charity auction. She demanded perfection from everyone, especially her sons, never questioning the cost. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small. "That depends," Officer Martinez said. "Given their age and clean prior records, there are options: community service, restitution, juvenile intervention programs. But first, I think you all need to have an honest conversation about how things got to this point." As Karen looked at her sons, really looked at them, perhaps for the first time in years, she saw not the perfect Stanford-bound students she'd been grooming, but unhappy, angry children desperate for her attention. The weight of this realization nearly brought her to her knees. She swallowed hard, pride bitter in her throat. "Can we have a moment alone, please?" As James and Officer Martinez stepped outside, Karen faced her greatest challenge yet, not an HOA violation or a neighborhood dispute, but the broken relationship with her own children. Karen sat in her pristine kitchen at 3:17 a.m., an untouched cup of chamomile tea growing cold before her. The house was silent except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator, a sound that had never before registered in her consciousness but now seemed deafening in the quiet aftermath of the evening's catastrophe. After a grueling conversation with Officer Martinez, she'd been allowed to take the boys home with the understanding that they would appear at the Juvenile Justice Center tomorrow. James had been surprisingly merciful, agreeing not to press charges for the breaking and entering if the boys made full restitution for all vandalism damages and completed community service. The twins were finally asleep after hours of tearful confessions that had shattered Karen's perception of their family life. Connor had admitted feeling invisible unless he was winning awards she could brag about at HOA meetings. Tyler revealed he'd started the vandalism as a way to feel something real in their perfectly curated but emotionally sterile home. Karen's phone buzzed with an incoming email, jolting her from her thoughts. The subject line made her stomach clench. "Emergency board meeting? Change in leadership." The email, sent to all Oak Ridge residents, detailed that due to personal circumstances, Karen would be stepping down as Hillwood president effective immediately. Gerald would serve as interim president until elections could be held. She hadn't even resigned yet. The betrayal stung, but beneath the initial flare of indignation, an unfamiliar sensation was taking root: relief. The thought of attending another meeting where people argued for 45 minutes about the acceptable height of garden gnomes suddenly seemed absurd. Karen scrolled through her phone's photo gallery, past hundreds of violation pictures. Unapproved bird baths, improperly stored trash cans, non-regulation mailbox posts, and landed on the last family photo they'd taken. It was from Christmas. The boys in matching sweaters, smiles that didn't reach their eyes, posing in front of their perfectly decorated tree. She couldn't remember a genuine laugh or a spontaneous hug in that house for years. When had she become this person? Karen tried to pinpoint the moment. Was it when she'd been passed over for partner at her law firm 5 years ago, redirecting her need for control toward the neighborhood she could rule instead? Or earlier, when her own mother's constant criticism had taught her that appearances were everything? She thought of James' unexpected kindness tonight. He had every right to press charges to expose her hypocrisy to the entire neighborhood. Instead, he'd shown her sons more compassion than she had in years. Outside, the first hints of dawn were breaking over Oak Ridge Estates. From her kitchen window, Karen could see the perfectly aligned houses, the regulation mailboxes, the approved landscaping, a community she helped shape through fear and rigid enforcement rather than cooperation and understanding. For the first time, she wondered what it might be like to simply be a neighbor rather than an enforcer, to plant wildflowers instead of cetacean novices, to invite the Garcia children over to swim rather than measuring their basketball hoops' distance from the curb. The thought was terrifying. Without her position, her rules, her control, who was she? As if in answer, Connor appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep. "Mom," he whispered, "are you okay?" Karen looked at her son, really looked at him, and saw not an extension of her ambitions or a reflection of her status, but a child who still, somehow, cared about her feelings despite everything. "No," she admitted truthfully. "But I think maybe I could be." She held out her arms, and after a moment's hesitation, Connor stepped into them. It was the first genuine hug they'd shared in longer than she could remember. By noon the next day, the Oak Ridge Estates rumor mill was operating at full capacity. Karen's phone buzzed incessantly with texts from neighbors expressing everything from gloating satisfaction to genuine concern. She ignored them all, focusing instead on the juvenile justice intake officer across the desk. "Mrs. Wilkinson, given the boys' clean records and their age, I'm recommending the diversion program," Ms. Patel explained, reviewing the file. "That means community service, restitution payments, and mandatory family counseling for 6 months. Family counseling. The words hung in the air like a threat. Karen had spent her adult life maintaining the appearance of perfection. The idea of spilling family secrets to a stranger made her physically ill. "And if we complete all requirements successfully?" Karen asked, lawyer mode activated despite her emotional turmoil. "The charges won't appear on their permanent records," Ms. Patel replied. "But this is their one chance, Mrs. Wilkinson. The program isn't just about punishment. It's about addressing the root issues." Tyler and Connor sat beside her, uncharacteristically quiet. Gone were their designer polo shirts and carefully styled hair. Today they wore rumpled t-shirts, having dressed themselves while she made frantic calls to her firm to request emergency family leave. As they left the Justice Center, Karen's phone rang with her mother's ringtone. No doubt she'd already heard about the scandal from her bridge partner whose daughter lived in Oak Ridge. Karen silenced it without answering. "Are you on his hell, Grandma?" Tyler asked, noticing the action. "Not today," Karen replied, surprising herself with the decision. Her mother's disapproval had been the background radiation of her life for 4 decades. For once, she couldn't summon the energy to manage it. At home, Karen faced another shock. Her impeccably maintained front yard had been toilet papered overnight, with heavy pinnaclorite spray painted across the garage door. "Mrs. Henderson." Connor identified immediately. "She's still mad about when you made her take down her daughter's art installation." Karen's instinct was to call the police to demand fingerprinting and security footage review. Instead, she found herself laughing, a rusty, unfamiliar sound that startled both boys. "Mom?" Tyler asked, clearly concerned for her sanity. "It's just," Karen gestured at the mess. "All this time, I've been protecting property values, and now ours will be the neighborhood eyesore." The boys exchanged worried glances as Karen marched to the garage, returning with trash bags. "Well, don't just stand there," she said, tossing them each a bag. "This is actually the perfect start to your community service hours." As they cleaned, neighbors drove by slowly, some taking photos, others pretending not to notice. Karen felt their judgment like a physical weight but kept working alongside her sons. With each piece of toilet paper they removed, a small piece of her rigid facade seemed to crumble as well. By late afternoon, the yard was clean again, though the spray paint would require professional removal. Karen was sweaty and disheveled, her manicure ruined, a state she would have found intolerable just days ago. "I'm ordering pizza for dinner," she announced, another break from their usual strictly organic home-cooked meals. The boys looked at her as though she'd suggested eating moon rocks. "With stuffed crust?" Connor ventured cautiously. "And wings," added Tyler. Karen hesitated only briefly. "Why not? And you can pick a movie. Any movie." As she placed the order, Karen noticed James Rodriguez walking his dog past their house. Their eyes met briefly. She expected to see triumph or judgment, but found only quiet acknowledgement, one neighbor recognizing another's struggle. 3 weeks into what Karen had mentally dubbed the aftermath, she stood before her bathroom mirror, scissors in hand. Her perfectly highlighted blonde bob, maintained with bi-weekly $200 salon appointments, had begun showing dark roots, a visible metaphor for the changes rippling through her life. With a decisive snip, she cut the first strand, watching it fall into the sink. The juvenile diversion program had appended their family schedule. Weekends once filled with enrichment activities and carefully orchestrated social engagements were now dedicated to the boys' community service at the local park, the very one they had vandalized. Their first assignment had been repainting the playground equipment under the supervision of a Parks Department employee who clearly enjoyed watching the former HOA president's children scrubbing graffiti in the summer heat. Karen had surprised everyone, including herself, by volunteering alongside them. The family counseling sessions were even more grueling than the physical labor. Dr. Winters had a gentle but persistent way of unraveling Karen's defenses, tracing her controlling behavior back to her own childhood under a hypercritical mother and absent father. Control is a response to fear. Dr. Winters had observed in their last session. What are you afraid would happen if you loosened your grip? The question had haunted Karen for days. A knock at the bathroom door interrupted her amateur haircut. "Mom?" Connor called. "There's someone at the door." Karen sighed, tying back her half-cut hair. "Coming." She opened the front door to find Linda Davis standing on her porch, holding a casserole dish. "I thought you might need this," Linda said simply, offering the dish. "It's just lasagna. My mother's recipe." Karen blinked in surprise. Since her resignation from the board, most neighbors had either avoided her entirely or approached with barely concealed schadenfreude. "Thank you," she managed, accepting the unexpected peace offering. "Would you like to come in? Fair warning. The house is a disaster." Linda's eyebrows rose slightly at this admission from the woman who had once circulated a petition against the Jacobsons' wind chimes for creating auditory clutter. Inside, the formerly showroom-perfect Wilkinson home showed signs of actual living. Books left open on tables, a half-completed puzzle on the dining room table, sneakers by the door instead of neatly stored in the mudroom. "We're making some changes," Karen explained, self-conscious under Linda's observant gaze. "I can see that." Linda nodded toward Karen's partially cut hair. "Bold move." Karen laughed, the sound coming more easily now with practice. "Not sure what I'm doing, to be honest. With any of it." Linda's expression softened. "None of us do, Karen. Some of us are just better at admitting it." The twins appeared from the den, curious about their visitor. Karen noticed they no longer stiffened in the presence of adults, expecting criticism or interrogation about their achievements. "We're building a model rocket," Tyler told Linda, unprompted. "Want to see?" "It's actually for science class," Karen added automatically, then caught herself. "I mean, it's just for fun, because they wanted to." Linda followed the boys to examine their project while Karen put the lasagna in the refrigerator, marveling at the simple gesture of neighborliness she'd never bothered to extend to others. Later, after Linda had gone and the boys were in bed, Karen returned to the bathroom to finish what she'd started. As she cut away the last of her carefully maintained bob, she studied her reflection. The asymmetrical, slightly ragged result would have horrified her former self. Her phone chimed with a calendar alert. "Hidden away meeting, 7 p.m. tomorrow." For a moment, old habits tugged at her, the need to attend, to control, to ensure standards were maintained. She picked up her phone, thumb hovering over the alert. Then, with deliberate calm, she deleted it. Outside her window, Oak Ridge Estates settled into the quiet rhythm of the summer evening. Somewhere, a child laughed. A dog barked. Wind chimes, unapproved but melodious, tinkled softly in the distance. For the first time in years, Karen Wilkinson listened to the sounds of her neighborhood without mentally cataloging violations or drafting complaint emails. 6 months after what the neighborhood had taken to calling Poolgate, Oak Ridge Estates gathered for its annual summer block party. Under Gerald's more relaxed leadership, the event had transformed from Karen's formerly regimented Community Standards Appreciation Day into an actual celebration, with bouncy castles, barbecue competitions, and a water balloon fight station that would have given the old Karen heart palpitations. Karen stood at the periphery, still finding her place in this new social landscape. She'd lost some things in the aftermath of the scandal, her HOA position, several fair-weather friends, and her mother's approval when she declined to send the twins to the prestigious math camp Grandma had paid for, opting instead for a regular summer camp where they could just be kids. But she gained unexpected things too. "Need help with those?" James Rodriguez appeared beside her, gesturing to the tray of homemade cookies she was carrying. "Thanks," Karen said, handing him the tray. Her hair had grown out into a short, practical style she maintained herself, and she traded her designer wardrobe for more casual clothes. The freedom from constant self-monitoring had lifted a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. They walked together toward the community center, their complicated history having evolved into a tentative friendship built on weekly co-supervision of the boys' community service hours. James's security camera footage had identified several other neighborhood children involved in minor vandalism, resulting in a significant shift in Oak Ridge parenting culture. More communication, less competition. The boys' final diversion program review is next week, right? James asked. Karen nodded. Ms. Patel says they've completed all requirements. Their records will be clean. She paused. Thank you again for not pressing charges for the break-in. James shrugged. Kids make mistakes. Adults too. He gave her a meaningful look. Speaking of which, how did the interview go? Karen had recently applied for a part-time position with the city's mediation department, a role that would use her legal background to help neighbors resolve disputes without litigation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I got it, she admitted. Starting next month. Congratulations, James said sincerely. You'll be good at it. Will I? Karen wondered aloud. After everything? Because of everything, James corrected. Nobody better understands how these conflicts escalate than someone who used to escalate them professionally. Across the park, Tyler and Connor were helping younger children at the face painting station, their final community service assignment having evolved into a genuine volunteer interest. Karen watched as Connor patiently redid a wobbly tiger stripe for a preschooler, his focus absolute. Tyler caught her eye and waved, his smile unguarded. Linda Davis approached with a clipboard. Karen, we need another volunteer for the dunk tank. Gerald was supposed to do it, but his back is acting up. The old Karen would have declined instantly, citing hygiene concerns or schedule conflicts. The new Karen considered it for a moment. Will people get to throw balls at me? She asked. That's generally how dunk tanks work, yes, Linda replied dryly. Karen laughed. Well, I imagine there's still a line of people who pay good money for that opportunity. Might as well make it count for the PTA fund. As she changed into the provided t-shirt and shorts in the community center bathroom, Karen caught sight of her reflection. She hardly recognized the relaxed woman looking back at her, ready to be publicly dumped for charity by the very neighbors she'd once terrorized with violation notices. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Heard about your new job. Part-time? With your education? We should discuss your choices. 6 months ago, that message would have sent her into a spiral of defensive justification. Today, she simply turned the phone face down on the counter. Outside, the sound of children's laughter mingled with music and conversation. Through the window, Karen could see the Henderson family setting up their unapproved bubble machine, sending iridescent spheres floating over the crowd. The Garcias had brought their unauthorized, multicolored patio lights to string around the picnic area. Mrs. Abernethy's new puppy, exceeding the weight limit Karen had once strictly enforced, romped joyfully through the grass.